Hi friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Saurabh Chhabra. In this video, I'm going to discuss about private endpoint and how we can configure private endpoints, how to use private endpoints to connect to the storage account from within a VNet, right? So if you find this useful, please like, share, and comment, and do subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really need it. So let's just get started. First of all, let me discuss about what is a private endpoint. Private endpoint is nothing but to access a particular resource from your local VNet. You don't want to connect to your resource from outside the network itself, right? So you don't want a public connection. You don't want to connect via internet, right? So you want a direct one-to-one connection to your resource within virtual network, right? So that is where private endpoint comes into picture, where once you attach a private endpoint to a storage account, in the background what it does is it creates a NIC, which is a network interface card, within a subnet range, right? So it can be dynamic IP allocation, or it can be a static IP. So what you usually do is you create a subnet, you create a private endpoint within that subnet, and once you want to attach a storage account to it, so private endpoint is attached to a storage account, and within that network, it would be accessible. I'm saying within that network, it can be accessible from your on-prem as well. So in practical, we usually connect to the internet. We usually connect to the private endpoint from on-prem, as well as from your web application or function app or whatever, right? If you have a storage account, if you have SQL servers, so it depends where are you attaching your private endpoint to. In this particular video, I would be creating a private endpoint and I would be attaching it to a storage account, but you can always attach to a SQL server, and within that server you can connect to the databases from your function app. So that is the practical scenario which usually happens in the corporate world. But there are scenarios where you want to connect your storage account within virtual network. So I would be creating a private endpoint and I would be showing that. So what you usually do is, let's go to my storage account, and I'll just show you where we usually go and create a private endpoint. You can always open private endpoint and then create one, but I want to go to the storage account, and I want to show you from where you can actually create a private endpoint. So this is something where I want to discuss, where you can directly enable virtual network access, right? So you can enable from all networks, you can enable specific virtual networks and IPs, right? From where you can access this storage account and it would be accessible. But right now we are talking about private endpoints, right? So it would be a one-to-one connection. It would be attaching a NIC to it, right? So when we are clicking on private endpoints, what we do is, I mean, this is usually used when we want an on-prem connection to your storage account, because here only Azure networks would be able to access it, right? But what and of course from outside also we can add public IPs. We can whitelist public IPs if you have Azure firewall, which is blocking your access. So that way also you can maneuver your access to the storage account. You don't want to open storage account to the outside world. So this is where cybersecurity comes into picture, where they don't want everything to be accessible through the net. So the next thing is creating a private account, right? So private endpoint. So what we do is we go in private endpoint connections, we click on private endpoints, and we start creating it. Okay. So yep, let the resource group be the same, and let's create a private endpoint. Private endpoint 01. So you can see that once I am creating a private endpoint, I'm naming it. It is actually naming the NIC as well, right? So it would be creating a network interface card as I create a private endpoint. And with that network interface card, uh, you will get an IP. It can be static, it can be dynamic, but it would be part of the subnet that you will select, right? So the region, yes, from which region your VNet is. So you would be selecting the VNet, and then you would be clicking on next. So this is where you target the sub resource, that what exactly you are trying to access. So I will just select blob, right? So I want to, select blob because I have for some files in blob, right? So I want this storage account to be connected, right? So this is the target sub resource that I want to connect to. So this is where you select your virtual network. So remember, the virtual network should be in the same region, right? So where your storage account is, right? So let me select the correct VNet. So it would be Dell Hub VNet Prod, yeah, and the subnet would be yeah. Let's just select Web one. I'm selecting Web one because what I wanted to show you is I want to uh, connect this storage account from my virtual machine, right? And virtual machine resides in web, so I would be able to access this with the private endpoint, and it would be connected, right? So this is where you would select your private IP allocation. Do you want it to be a dynamically allocated, or do you want it to be static? If you click on static, then you will have the choice to select your IP, right? Let it be dynamic so that it would be easy. So this is where you select your DNS configuration. Remember, if you select no, it will not integrate with your private DNS. But if you have your private DNS, you can select that, and it would be connected through there. Yep, existing private DNS tied to a single is not associated with two different private endpoint, as it will not be possible to properly resolve two different A record. The point number this is this, and I mean if you already have a record there, then it will not be possible. But yes, it will definitely create a new one. Here you will give tags, and yep, so it will go check the validation, and then it'll start creating. Let me pause the video while it creates. Okay. Yes, the private endpoint is created. So let me just go to the resource and see. Yes, so this is the private endpoint, and the private link resource is the storage account. I will just go to the DNS configuration and see. Yes, so this is the FDQN. Let me show you the private DNS where the record would be created. Yes, so this is the A record that would be created. So this is the private IP of the subnet, which would be given to the private endpoint. And what I'll do is I'll just copy the FDQN, and I will just show you from my laptop what is the what I'm getting when I try to connect to the endpoint. So interesting thing is this, that I'm able to resolve it, but the thing I want you to look at it is that the IP which I get is a public IP. So this storage account, this private end link is accessible through the internet because it has a resolvable FDQN, but it is having a public IP. But as I told you that we want it to be connected privately, right? So what I'll do is I have a VM which is uh, already inside the VNet. It just think that it is part of your on-prem, because what exactly we are doing is we are trying to connect your on-prem to a storage account, right? To a storage account which is having a private endpoint, because eventually you want that scenario, right? You want your on-prem application to be able to connect to the storage account, or to be able to connect to the SQL server which is in Azure, right? So what I'll do is I'll just open command from here, and from here let's do ns lookup, and let's see what IP we are getting. Yes, so you can see the IP address which we are getting is 10206, and the resolver is of course, the Microsoft DNS, right? So this is the Microsoft DNS IP. So here we go. Yep. So this is how you are able to connect. What I'll do is I'm gonna show you the other way as well to connect to the storage account from Storage Account Explorer. Let me show it to you. Okay, so let me just open Storage Explorer. As we are able to resolve it, we know that it is connecting to privately, right? So I'll just show you that how we usually connect to the storage account. So from the virtual machine, let me open the storage account for you. And it will be done via account name and key. So this is the account name. Okay, so let me just try to connect. So Azure storage account, and we know we are trying to connect it from the name and the key, right? So display name can be anything. So it's just let's type SA connection, whatever. So this is the account name, and let's copy the key. So this is the key, and let's connect. Yep, connect. Yes, so you know that we are able to connect, and what I can do is I can click on SA connection, and then I can see that it is connected. Let me see, we have logs and store. Within that store we have an Excel. I'll just confirm that we do have same things in storage account, and we are able to access with the key, right? Yep, we go into containers. Yes, we can see that in the blob storage we have store and logs, and within the store container we have the cost estimation draft Excel. Yes, so we are able to connect to the storage account, and we are able to access the files in it, and we are inside a virtual machine which is inside VNet, and we are considering as an on-prem. So the only difference that happens in the non-prem connection and VNet connection is that you should have your firewall rule enabled, so that you have the private endpoint IP and the port numbers enabled, whitelisted in your firewall, whitelisted at your NSGs. The one more thing that is a practical issue that comes up when you're trying to access your private endpoint is that you have to enable certain things, right, to be able to allow private endpoint connection. So I'll just show you. So this is my VNet, and it's very important actually. Just pay a little bit attention on this. So we are talking about a VNet, and then we are talking about a subnet on which our private endpoint resides, right? So the one thing that you need to enable is this, right? Private endpoint network policy. If you don't allow this, it will not allow your private endpoint to be accessible through the subnets. But one-to-one connections, yes, it can. So you need to enable these two settings, which is network security groups as well as route tables. So if you select this, then only the routing will happen from your on-prem to the on-prem firewall, and then to your express route will you, and then it will go to your Azure firewall if you have Azure firewall, and then it will route to your network security groups, and then to your subnet, and then to the private endpoint, right? So this is how the connection would happen, right? So you want this setting to be enabled in order to you want to have a connection from your on-prem to the private endpoint, right? I cannot show you because I don't have a private endpoint connection, so this is how it's done. Okay, so that's it. So if you like this video, please like, share, and comment, and do subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you very much.